podcast. I'm Darby.
And I'm Caitlin.
Well, it's just us today.
It's just us. That's right.
So we wanted to recap we've had 5-6 weeks of interviews.
Yeah.
Just people sharing their testimonies, and it's been amazing.
It's been so good. I've loved it.
I
mean, you loved it.
Yes, everyone. I've just been like, oh wow, that was so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just think testimonies, there's a reason the Bible talks about them being so powerful. And if you've listened at all lately, then you know each one is so unique and so powerful in a different way.
Yes.
And we've had so much just interaction about them. People thinking, oh, that spoke to me. That was so encouraging.
Right.
So I love that it goes way beyond even what we share.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's our hope, and that's the goal. It's just to give people an opportunity to share. I think what I have loved most, I have several things, but one thing I love most is that when people share their testimony, it's like we watched them recall like the faithfulness of God throughout their life as they unfolded parts of their story. So we've had Candace, we've had Erica and Drew, Tina,
Peyton.
and Peyton, right?
I think that's it.
Yeah.
5.
And I feel like each one different, but I feel like there was a similar story throughout, in that at one point in their life they had an idea of God, or maybe even they were saved. They knew who He was, but then there came a shift in their life where they're like, okay, now I'm going to actually live for Him. And I think that's purely what, testimony is just, let me just share my story of what has happened to me. And so it's just been so good.
Yeah.
It's been so good.
I loved what you just said, and how there was this knowing of God and then knowing Him.
Yeah.
And I really think that's what stuck out to me too.
Yeah.
With Drew's or Peyton's, just both of theirs, I remember thinking, wow, it was like who they thought God was and who He really was when they got to know Him in that level, that He really is all the good things.
Yeah.
So I just think that's so cool how then that changes your life.
Yeah.
Knowing God in that way is what changes your life.
Yeah, exactly. And we've heard from so many of y'all and just friends and family members just how powerful it has been just to hear from other people.
Yeah.
And I think that so often we are just so shy to share about our life for various reasons. But if the last 5 weeks have proved anything, it's that when you share your story, it creates common ground. It creates unity. You're like, wow, you went through that? I didn't know. I've been through that too.
Yes.
It just opens your eyes to, wow, I'm not in this alone. I've had those same feelings. I made that same decision. And I think so often the enemy, he always just wants to isolate us. That is like such a number one tactic of him. It's like, for him to lie and say you're in this alone. No one else would make that kind of decision. No one else has lived that kind of life. But when we open our mouths and we say, no, I did, but God did this, then it's like it just shuts him up real quick.
And it's not about finding one person who has the right solution.
Right.
I felt like God really just said, it's not finding the right person with the right solution. It's realizing that people are the solution.
That's right.
People are the solution because we need all the testimonies.
Yes.
God needs all of our testimonies. He doesn't just need one. And so it hasn't been a matter of like, can we just ask the right person the right question, hear the right story?
No.
We need them all.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to hear everybody's story, because we all at some point go through similar things. And I love what you said, that it builds that connection.
It does. Yeah. So I think if we can encourage you with anything, and just encouraging myself, because sometimes I think you feel like you have to just say something so profound for it to mean anything. And that's not true. So for me, even myself, it's like, how can I just weave my story into daily conversation? And I think that you should too. What is profound is the glory of God in your life. That is profound all the time. No matter if it was spanned among years of you figuring out who He is, or if it happened in one night, like that will always be profound, and that will always it will always be meaningful to people. So I think we have to find opportunities just to share parts of our story with people and not be afraid of what they might think after. Because not one time did we sit with somebody and them leave and I think, wow, like,
they're a mess.
That's a mess. Or, or like, oh, I can't think of them the same way. If anything, you're like, I love them so much more. I care about them. Like, it's never the opposite. So, I don't know. I think we have to get better about sharing our stories because I do think you could go to a church, you could listen to a million podcasts or a million messages on YouTube and hear great things and learn. But there is something about the power of just real, raw testimony that I honestly feel like it can make a quicker impact.
Agreed. Yeah.
Than anything else.
And it sheds light on your own life. Because I think the other thing I loved is when they did share, when they got over. And we joked about this space where we film, but it's almost like because there wasn't an audience looking back, there wasn't fear of judgment, you can share much more openly. And I think that's, the places that we want to hide are actually the places when we let the light on them. God gets the most glory from it because he's like, man, I redeemed all of that. I didn't just redeem that little bit that looked kind of bad. I'm going to redeem the very messiest, the worst places in your life. And so he's getting the most glory. And I loved after each person just thinking, man, God has just done so much. And there's so much left for him still to do. And that's encouraging because we're all there. We're all in this process. And it's so cool.
Yeah, I think I'd love to talk just a little bit about some of the different episodes. I'm thinking that you just said, like, this is just the beginning. That was really part of Peyton's story is that, she's known her husband for so many years. She's been a believer for many years. But just within the last few months of the last year, have things really shifted. And she's like, this is just the beginning, and I'm so excited for what could be. She even shared how, she's got new eyes for her husband, like just a new affection for him because he on his own has been pursuing the Lord. And, what she thought he was great, but now that Matthew Clayton is now pursuing the Lord for himself, it's just like, she's like, hey, man, you're looking good, because that is so attractive, And I think I love that she was like so excited for what is to come, that it really is just the beginning for her and for her family. I loved her story, and she's 23, which is crazy.
Yeah, I know.
And she's just taking good steps. So
I think that was always our heart in this podcast, just because that's been so impactful in our lives, just the testimony. And I think a lot of times we get stuck in thinking the testimony is just the moment you got saved. And that's awesome, and that is a really good starting point for a lot of people. But I think your testimony continually builds.
For sure.
As you continue to walk with the Lord. It's just the places where he's doing the work and getting the glory, and you're trusting him in those ways. And so even with Erica, just grinding it out, the daily, the just choosing him. And, I was talking with another woman earlier in the week, and she was telling me about all these kind of hard things she's been going through. And she's like, but I think we're okay. I think we're on the other side of it now. And I said, you know what? I just got to tell you, you endured. And you made it. And it was a bad weekend, but guess what? The whole point was just that you make it. It wasn't ever that you avoided it in the first place. And that's something God has just shown me in my own life. Like, Darby, it wasn't about you avoiding sin, because you were never able to avoid sin. You were always a sinner. The point is that you endure with me. You endured in your marriage. You endured in that friendship. You endured in that job. You endured in that yes that you gave me. So you honor that commitment. And now I can honor your faithfulness, because God says he will be faithful to those who show themselves faithful. So, I think you could see that in every testimony that was shared where people chose to be faithful. God proved his own faithfulness.
I think with Erica, what's kind of lasted with me is just the intentionality she has with her family and her girls. It's so easy to just want the time to pass so fast because it's hard with children specifically. And when you think about it, Darby reminds me all the time that, my children are my greatest ministry. Yours too.
Yeah.
And that we don't want the time to fly by, because these are huge years. For me, I was talking with Darby the other morning. I said, when I talk to adults, when I talk to my peers, even just hearing some from the people that have shared their testimony, they recall back to their childhood, and right now in the life that they're living now, they're having to undo some of the things that they were taught growing up.
Yeah.
And reconciling, okay, is this true? Is this right? Is this scriptural? And for me personally, I have just been so convicted to not to rush the time with my children, to be intentional with them, because really these days I am laying the foundation in them.
Yeah.
I am teaching them what is right and what is wrong, what is right according to the Bible, not what's right according to Caitlin or Mason. What does God say? And that is humbling, because I don't think I'm always on the same page as the Bible, because I am, I get angry, or I have a temper, or whatever it is. So for me, I go back to, Erica's story of, she's involved in so many things. She's trying to figure out what things she should focus on, but forever and always her children and her family are going to come first. And I love that. So, thinking back to Drew.
Yeah.
Drew's story, so cool.
I know.
So interesting.
And it was neat with his story to just have a space for a moment that he had to recall, because we asked him. And so, to recall God's faithfulness, because I think as we go along in life, we are met with new circumstances that seem more overwhelming than the ones we've already conquered. And so I think we need the reminder that he was faithful before. So who God was then is who he will always be and can be now. And so I really loved that, because sometimes we don't stop to really remind ourselves, man, I remember when God did this and it was so good, and it wasn't the way I wanted it to be, but it was actually ended up being better. And so I think that's what can spur us on then.
Exactly. I think when your mindset is always, what can I do for everybody else? How can I help you? How can I help you grow? How can I help you see the faithfulness of God? Sometimes you grow, I don't want to say numb, but you don't quickly recall the things that he's done in your own life, because you're always thinking outward, or you're trying to help other people. And what I feel like we saw in Drew is because Drew ministers to people all the time. It's his job to lead people in worship, to have spirit-filled conversations all the time, and that is his heart. But then for him to just be able to sit here with us and actually think about what God has done for him personally, it was amazing. And I think that we always, forever, have to make it personal for us. I think when you're in conversation with people, and maybe you want to hear more of their testimony, the first and best place to start is, let me share some of mine. Let me get there, let me go there for myself and show you what God has done for me. Because sometimes we can get caught up in everybody else, and it's good.
Yeah.
But we need to recall what the Lord has done for us.
Yeah, we do. We need to get better. You look throughout the Bible, and he was always saying that they needed to set up a memorial and an altar, and to remember that, just to remember that who he is in your life. And I think I love that these testimonies, these episodes are a memorial in a sense to what God's done in their lives. And my hope is that a year from now or 5 years from now, if any of those people are going through a new challenge, that we'll be able to say, hey, watch your episode.
Exactly.
Remember what he did then.
Exactly.
And so he'll do it again.
Well, let's think about Candace when she has a Pilates studio on the square one day when it is full up and running.
Yeah, I know.
She can come back to this moment and say, that was just a faith step, and look at what it is now, or look at what the Lord's done between, then and now.
Well, even this podcast,
for sure.
Kayla and I are always talking, there's no plan in this. There is this could be, every episode can be the last one. We don't know. And so I think that's the hard part in the saying of the yes sometimes. You don't know what it's going to look like. You're just choosing to trust.
Yeah.
and to you're making a future yes based off of the past yes.
Yeah.
And so really it's God's faithfulness.
That's right.
Then I know he'll be faithful again, and I'm surrendered to whatever that's going to look like.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the hope.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, I was thinking this morning, something the Lord told me, and it got me thinking, because as we're talking about testimony, you know, and in the Bible, the Israelites had moved, they had conquered the promised land, but then they got there and there were giants, and so God had really told them, drive out those giants. But it kept saying over and over again, they failed to do it. They failed to drive them out. They failed to drive them out. And the Lord said to me, he said, what you failed to drive out will drive you to fail.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, when we don't share our testimony, we're failing to drive out the darkness. We're failing to drive out the enemy's attacks on our thoughts and our knowledge against the Lord. We're failing to completely drive out doubt that we have about who God is and the power of what he can do, the Holy Spirit in our lives. And so I think when we fail to drive out some of those things, they do drive us to fail again. So we continually fight the same battles, or we have the sins, and maybe they manifest differently, but we have got to be good about sharing our stories and continually driving out those things so we aren't driven to fail.
That's right. Yeah, I was just reading in Ephesians yesterday. There's a little section that talks about us believers as children of the light. You are children of the light. You are children of God. It says, put away your former self, put on your new self, which is created in the likeness of God. And it said, you are the children of the light. You represent light. And where light touches darkness, it is exposed. And, you know, when I think about putting off my former self, putting on my new self, there's testimony wrapped up in that whole thing, because when you go from your former to your new, something happened, and that something is a recognition of who God is. Wow, he did that for me. And so I think when we, because I don't know, I think sometimes we're so scared to share the things that we've done or the choices we made, and you don't want to share them in a way that glorifies them, sure. But when you say that, you know, this is what I did, and that was a part of my former life, because I think about, you know, I feel like for me, you know, sometimes I have to reconcile, like, and I'm just processing this right now. I literally asked Mason the other day, like, babe, I've never like faced a personal tragedy like head on. I said, do you think that I have to face that one day? Like, even just more so than just losing a loved one because of old age or something, which is awful in itself, because you don't want that, you know, that's inevitable, but something like tragic. I said, do you think that I have to face that one day, because I never have? And he didn't have an answer for me, and I don't need an answer. It's just thought processes that I'm having. But in my own life, it's been a little bit of the same for a long time, right? So in my own life, when I'm sharing my testimony, I say, you know what, I met God. I knew about him when I was really young, and I made the decision to ask him in my heart, you know, and to live for him. But I did not make him Lord of my life until I was 21 years old. You know, I lived a good life, made good decisions, was a good person up until then, but he was not Lord over my decisions, over my processes, over the loves that I had in my life, over my friendships, nothing, until I said, you know what, Lord, you have all of me. And so I think sometimes I might shy away from sharing about my story, because I'm like, there's nothing about it that's, I don't know how it's going to help you. And then I think about my husband, who he lived several years of his life, you know, way different than I was living mine. And I think, well, he has a way more powerful testimony. Not true, because the Lord has been faithful in my life, even when he wasn't Lord over my life. But the second I did, man, everything changed. And the same for my husband. He had a good foundation set up from his childhood. He knew where to fall back to when he needed it most. So I think in all of that, when I think about I am the light, when the light touches the darkness, it exposes the things in the darkness. And then the enemy doesn't have control over those things anymore. The Lord does, you know? So I think that I think any testimony, it gives God glory, and we shouldn't be shy to tell it, thinking like, overthinking it, because that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I think we're trying to determine its value.
Exactly.
But Jesus, the price he paid was the same for yours and for mine.
Exactly.
It would have still been death, your sin and my sin. And I think that's what people do. We need to say, well, we need sin to be in a certain order so that we can punish it accordingly.
Right.
And we can put everyone in their boxes and make justice ourselves. But God says, well, Jesus had to die for you as much as he had to die for me. The price was the same. And at the foot of the cross, it's all level.
That's right.
And so I think that's why every story has value. There's value in obedience and in making wise choices. I want that for my kids. I want their testimony to feel like a lot, because right now I'm watching my oldest boys grind out making good choices, and it is not rewarding right now. And they ask me all the time, Mom, when is the harvest coming?
Yeah.
When is the fruit coming? Because you keep telling me it's coming, and I'm really tired of waiting. And that's hard. I know that's hard. But I want them at 25 or 35 or whatever to say, yeah, it was worth it.
Yes.
I don't want them to choose a hard road so they can see a redemption. While that's beautiful and that's more of my story, I don't want that for them. God doesn't want that for them. And because the consequences are what we can't avoid. But all that to say is just that the testimony, everyone's, is so powerful.
Yes. It is.
So good.
And we're going to have more people on here.
We are. So excited.
We're going to continue this. And, I think that we just want you to know, whoever you are, where you're listening, that we are just so in this with you.
Yeah.
We are so figuring out, how do I be bold and share my story? Because sometimes I want to shrink back and let somebody else do it.
And don't wait to get asked to be on a podcast to share it.
That's right.
Share it with someone at the coffee shop.
Yes.
I can honestly say I have heard more testimony sitting across from someone one-on-one in my office, in a coffee shop, in a small group.
Yeah, for sure.
Way more practicing those stories. So just share it.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, guys.